I can't imagine like the roller coaster, the back and forth, like
I think it takes a
the
village.
uncertainty. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, like stability is one thing, but like certainty, though it sounds like splitting hairs, I think there's a huge difference in there. Like that uncertainty would really mess with my head, like not
Yeah, like how
knowing,
long am I going to be with
yeah,
these people?
can I settle down or not? Like,
Yeah.
Right. No, and that's valid. That is very valid. So we do have some kiddos that are like, well, I've been here for so long, it doesn't matter. So they've learned to detach themselves and disassociate. And then some kids who have been in the foster care system have probably seen up to 15 different placements.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's got
Yeah.
to be
And
really hard on the kid.
yeah.
As the state is concerned, everything is just a bunch of numbers and regulations and documents and things like that. It doesn't have any like collective concern over the well-being of kids. It's just kind of a machine that handles them. All right. So, welcome to another kitchen sink microscopy. I'm Eric Rosenblatt, and we'd love it if you'd like and share this video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down there. That'd be really great.
hey, I'm Casey Rochford. We write our own music. It's right at the end, the tail end of the episode. So you want to hang out all the way through to the end there and check that out. So tonight we've got, or well, today for you, it's night here in Germany. We've got a guest on. Jennifer is here to talk about like the foster system in general. And go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you do and what got you interested in all that.
My name's Jennifer, and I have always been a caregiver most of my life. Just kind of helped people along the way, and that's kind of how I ended up in human services. And now I do direct care for foster kids. I also am a relative placement for a nephew of mine.
Well, I've always wanted to do an episode like touching on this because it's like
It's kind of
I'm
related
adopted,
to you.
but
Yeah.
that's very different from like the foster system, which is more, like a temporary gig, whereas
Mhm.
adoption, you just kind of jump right into it, and that's all I've ever known. So,
But it is there are similarities in that
yeah,
it's not
yeah,
like a biological person taking care of you.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in your case, though, Jennifer, it is biological, but it's still foster. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And there's different levels of the system as well when going through the process, because there's emergency placement, which I actually work for now currently for a group home. I also am a behavioral residential counselor for a BRS house, which is with the same company. So there's multiple levels. So, like when a kid is first removed from home, they're placed in emergency care. And then they determine within the first 72 hours to 5 days of whether or not the child goes into shelter care. Shelter care is that they're still staying emergency and then they start reaching out to relatives or if next to kin to see if we can place the children within family. And if not, then worst case scenario, they end up in foster and they stay with us for up to 60 days, hoping to be placed. Some cases close within 72 hours and some will stay open for 5 years. It all depends on the needs
Wow.
and how much of a struggle it is to find them placement. So there's a
Wow.
lot of gaps in the foster care system still.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was about to ask, like, usually what I hear is not so great feedback about the whole experience, but I'm wondering, like, is that so much of a problem with the system, or is it just happenstance for real shitty circumstances? Like,
It's
it's
kind
not a
of
good
both.
situation to be in, but like the system is kind of there to do the best it can, right?
Yeah, and it's a lot of gray areas that they're still trying to filter through. Like the law just changed in July for protecting the parents' rights. So they're trying to keep the kids with the parents, which means the state has to offer the parents more help than they normally would. So
Hmm.
usually when a child's removed, it's either for abuse or neglect.
Hmm.
And that then they have to go through this investigation and they have to see like what actually took place, and then is there criminal charges that are going to pen. Some kids come to us in protective custody. It's a huge mess that they sort through.
Hmm.
And then some kids who have been in the foster care system have probably seen up to 15 different placements.
Wow. Ooh,
Yeah,
that's got to
yeah,
be
and
really hard on the kid.
yeah, there's a few that I have met along the way. They've been in the foster care system since they were 2 and 4.
Hmm.
So, yep, they get bounced around. Sometimes it's just that people stop wanting to foster because it's too much. Part of being a foster parent, you have to go through licensing every year
Hmm.
as long
I
as you're a
mean,
foster parent.
that that kind of makes sense, I suppose. But like, yeah, d- do you think that the psychological impact of changing that many times is better or worse than just kind of being stuck in the original bad situation? I mean, obviously that's going to vary, but
I,
um,
th- I think that in some cases, that's a 50-50
uh,
of whether or not they return. Can mom and dad get the help, or whoever they were with can get the extra support? And it's very hard at times to know what kind of support to give them. Um, you know, and then there is it does do a lot of psychological strain on a child because they're
yeah,
looking for stability and structure.
Yeah.
And yeah, you come to a facility whose structure is, hey, this is our normal, but that's their normal.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like, okay, here's what we're doing. We're changing up your world, and it's already been turned inside out, right? So
yeah,
we, as the caregivers, have to be as stable as we possibly can to give them the best that they can for a short period of time.
Yeah.
So,
Makes
so
sense.
it does become a juggle to see, and these kids go through a lot because some are coming in with mental health issues, some are coming in with PTSD already.
Mhm.
So we have to help them and coach them through. So we do a lot of skill training on our behalf as caregivers as well. So there's a lot that goes into what we do. And I don't think that people realize like how much goes into this and helping a kid become stable.
Oh, I can imagine. And because you have to play many roles, including being a counselor,
Yeah,
which is a lot. That I could see why people get out of foster care because it's I would imagine it can be really taxing
it is.
on the caregiver doing that. Because yeah, you've got these kids coming in, and I mean, they have these very traumatic things, and you're helping them deal with it, and in a way, you're almost experiencing kind of what they've gone through indirectly. And oof, I don't think I couldn't do it. I I definitely couldn't do it. But that makes me wonder, like, why did you get into this particular field?
Because I personally understand where these kids are coming from because I went through similar situation.
Mhm.
oh,
And, I know it's like you don't, some of us had that opportunity because I had a great support system going through what I did. And I also learned the system, unfortunately, at a young time. So it was
hmm.
like a lot of back and forth. And it's like,
I agree.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
um, yeah, a great deal of my cousins uh, were originally foster. My aunt and uncle adopted most of them whenever that they were able to. I know sometimes there's uh, conflicts with the biological parents and all that. But do you find that that happens a lot where fostering moves into actual adoption, or is that more of a rarity?
So adoption is automatically put on the plate in
Hmm.
some cases. So like if a parent's going to be incarcerated for a long period of time, they have to look at the stability of the child. So like for instance, mine and my husband's cases is that we've had our nephew since he was 4 months old. He's been in the system since he was a month and a half.
Hmm.
Um, adoption was put on the table. We had the choice of, do we want to do adoption? The only way that we agreed to do adoption is if something super horrible happened to the parents.
Uh-huh.
So then the next track is, do we do long-term care or do we do guardianship? And sometimes the state does dual tracking. So right now we're currently on the venture of he's going to return home to one of the parents, and or if they can't get it together in the time frame that the state wants to close the case, we will get the guardianship. And there's two different types of guardianship. So there's a Title 11 where they don't need the parent's signature, and then there's a Title 13 where they do need the parent's signature, and the parents can participate, have visits with the kiddo, and have the opportunity to overturn that at some point when they can prove that they're stable.
Oh boy, that's
Oh,
like an emotional roller coaster.
It is.
That's
It
exactly
is
what
very
I was
much.
thinking. And,
Can I ask how old your nephew is now? Like you said, you've had him since he was 4 months old.
He will be 2 next month.
Oh gosh. So
Yeah.
there's definitely some like attachments.
Absolutely.
that's what I was
Absolutely.
gonna say. Like, how do you deal with that? Like when it's time for them to go on to somewhere else.
So we we do our best to make sure we have the relationship with the parent reestablished. And sometimes you're going to come across parents who are like, "Oh no, like it's myself and my brother. We have a relationship, but it's not the greatest, and it's going to take time to get back there, you know." And when he was going through this, he was grieving the loss of his kid, which is totally, absolutely understandable. And it's like, I understand. We're gonna do our best to get him home. I just need him to, do his part. And he's been doing his part, but it does hinder some things when you have a concern, because then you got to take yourself out of the picture as a relative care and say, okay, I have to now look at the situation. Are we doing what's best for my nephew?
Mm-hmm.
So if there's a hiccups, it's like, okay, I'm here to support you. How and when do you need that support at the same time? So there can be some conflicts in there, and the attachment. It's going to be difficult watching him go home.
Well, yeah. I
It's,
mean, like there's also got to be like a gray area age where the kid might be like, no, I don't want to change, but they're not old enough to like say so, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
that must happen often too, right?
It does. It does. And those kids will always ask for their caregiver who's had them for a very long time. Very long time. I have a friend who also is a foster parent. She adopted her cousins, and she was in the process of adopting the youngest one. And unfortunately, she didn't have that opportunity before she moved out of state for job change. Um, the youngest ended up staying here and ended up being put in a different foster care, but she still remembers her first caregiver. She calls her mom.
Hmm.
Huh?
So it is
Oh
definitely
yeah,
hard. It's a strain.
yeah. You absolutely get like a very familial attachment,
Yeah.
both directions.
Yep.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yep. It's
Uh,
hard.
yeah. I mean, I was adopted, so I went directly to a family. I was always with them. Apart from like 2 weeks where I was in nurse care, I guess. Um, I don't really know how that was logistically handled, but um, so I've never really like known anything different when it comes to like fights over custody or anything. It was all very cut and dry
Right.
earlier. And I met my biological family once I was an adult. So it was like a moot point at that time, whether or not, they wanted to be involved or not, which the father did and the mother not so much. But I can't imagine like the roller coaster, the back and forth, like uh, the uncertainty.
Mhm.
I mean, like stability is one thing, but like certainty, though it sounds like splitting hairs, I think there's a huge difference in there. Like that uncertainty would really mess with my head, like not
Yeah, like how
knowing,
long am I going to be with
yeah,
these people?
can I
Or
settle down or not? Like,
yeah,
yeah,
Right. No, and that's valid. That is very valid. So we do have some kiddos that are like, well, I've been here for so long, it doesn't matter. So they've learned to detach themselves and disassociate. And that's really hard sometimes to watch these kids go through that because there's no trust. And
mhm.
it's
mhm,
very difficult to get close to somebody and say, okay, I'm ready to heal. And until they find permanency, and sometimes they age out and they're on their own before they get that opportunity, if they ever have that opportunity for that matter,
wow.
and it's when you have difficulty making those connections and those relationships, it's stress, it's a lot of extra stress for them as to whether or not they can have healthy relationships with other people down the road.
Oh, I'd imagine it has a huge impact on their future development,
Yeah.
their adulthood. I mean, all of those formative years that you go through with all this turmoil happening. I, oof. I mean, I still think that foster care is a very, very important service. It obviously it is. I mean, without that, these kids would be nowhere
Yeah.
essentially. So, I mean, this is still preferable to the alternative, but obviously, it's not perfect. What do you think being in like working in that world? What can be done to improve it,
We
if
need
anything?
definitely a lot can be improved. I think it's the having a balance between the foster parents and we have to follow all these whacks and stuff, the laws that they have put in place, because it's like we're glorified babysitters. We all joke around about it in the system, like we're glorified babysitters because like the state's like we're the parent and we get to tell you what you can and can't do with this kid. So it's like, okay, how do you want us to redirect this child who's being outlandish? So
Mm,
you're going to have a kid that's just going to while out because they don't know how to control themselves. What would you recommend? And you're going to butt heads sometimes along the way with the professionals. And it's like, okay, we're trying to teach the kid how to advocate for themselves because we can't always be that voice for them in the sense. So I think we need to change that so that those who have day to day contact with the kiddos have a better opportunity to support them and help them ask for what they need,
mm,
especially as they hit a certain age and they've already been in the care for a long period of time. We
mm,
definitely need more foster parents, especially therapeutic homes, as we're starting to see a rise in kids that are having mental health issues, are coming in for rehabilitation um, from drug and alcohol abuse.
mhm.
So we have a lot of that. So if we can find a balance in that in services and say, okay, instead of waiting long periods of time to be assessed and say, okay, this, and this, and if a parent or foster parent could have those services already rendered for the child coming in, then I think there's just going to be a better success rate for our kiddos.
So the process right now is lengthy and difficult to even become a foster parent if you want to,
Oh,
right?
oh yeah, it took us almost 6 months to get our foster care license, even just as a relative care.
Wow.
It took a long time. So our nephew stayed in care until he was 4 months.
Jeez.
Mm,
Uh, yeah, I definitely can see how there need to be improvements in that. And you said the state is technically the parent, huh? Like I've always heard ward of the state, but I've never heard it phrased that way before, and that kind of hit me hard. Like that is so impersonal.
I was gonna say the exact same
I mean,
thing.
if
Yeah.
the state is the parent, like bring your dad to work day, does Governor Inslee have to show up? Or
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, that like you had just said that yeah, the state is the parent. To me, well, and you had said it's impersonal, and yeah, it absolutely is, and maybe that's part of the issue. too is the state. If, as the state is concerned, everything is just a bunch of numbers and regulations and documents and things like that. It doesn't have any like collective concern over the well-being of kids. It's just kind of a machine that handles them essentially as if they're, oh well, yeah, and especially it's handling so many at once that obviously there's no way you can. It's just kind of like if you're a farmer, like I've had chickens, but I've only had like a handful of chickens, and I name all of them and I care about them and stuff. But if I had a farm with thousands of chickens, I wouldn't care. There's a bunch of chickens. Maybe I might take a liking to one of them, but
Yeah.
I'm a farmer, they're chickens. And I could see that kind of being the case with foster care and the
Yeah.
kids. Like,
I mean, you'd be well intentioned, but it's impossible to form that many bonds, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've gotten pretty close to some kiddos, and with our group home, we acclimate them to the community so they can have a family outside of what they're already going through, so that they know how to have those connections and build the support team. And going back to the state is the parent. I have met quite a few CPS workers who have become foster parents themselves.
oh, nice.
It is
Oh, wow.
hard. It is difficult because they have caseloads up to 25, 35 kiddos, and, to have to branch out. And there's like 6 different levels for CPS workers, because like it's a case lead that comes in and they'll sit and watch the kids that are in the office, because this is where some of our kiddos slip between the lines, because there is no placement to take these kiddos. So they're either sitting in a hotel or they're sitting at the DCYF office waiting for placement, because some of them may require extra help that some of these guys don't have. There's not a lot of BRS houses out there that will take the kiddos for long term. There's not enough therapeutic foster homes. We have more foster kids in the system than we do homes in the state of Washington.
Maybe that also could be part of the solution too, is to perhaps streamline the process of becoming a foster parent, maybe improve the way it's done so that it's easier for people to do that. Would that be a possibility?
That is a possibility. Like my company, they help people who want to become foster parents, and they walk them through the process, where if you were to go through an adoption agency, it's a lot longer and it's a grueling process, and you're forking out a lot of money, when you go through an agency to adopt or just to be a foster parent. And you're talking about prepping your home, because general conversation is, when you walk into someone's house, what do you normally see? It's inviting, correct?
Yeah.
Some of these homes are not always inviting, but for the extra step, we have to have fire extinguishers. How many fire extinguishers do you see in someone's home? Or a fire ladder?
Usually no.
Yeah, exactly.
That or they expired in 1974.
Right. And how many times do you see, oh, here's an escape route for your house, and here's a bug out bag for natural disasters. So we have, as foster parents, we go through this grueling process to prep, because we don't think of these things in a normal home, as people will say normal, but that's something we should be teaching anyway, but we don't.
So I would probably be an ideal foster parent, because I'm like, I have all that stuff other than needing a gun safe. That would be the only thing that I would have to add. But I've got fire extinguishers, and I have a way of getting out of the house, like a fire ladder and all kinds of stuff. Although I don't have a lot of extra rooms in the house. That's the downside. But that's,
right.
I would imagine there's a huge amount of prep work that goes into it. Like it's kind of like when somebody, a new parent, basically is expecting a child. Like, oh wow, we have to totally change everything. They got to have a room and a crib, and they need all their stuff, and there's all this different thing, a different protocol you follow.
Well, didn't you kind of MacGyver your own system to help a friend's daughter not have to go into the system?
Yeah. Yep. Actually, I built a tiny house in my backyard, a very rough and quick and dirty one, basically. But yeah, so
Definitely up to code.
uh, absolutely. Yes. I follow all the code. But it was an emergency build because she was about to be homeless and she had a dog, and so I kind of built this thing up for her, so she could live in the backyard with a dog, and it's worked out. She's actually moving in with her mom now. They're
Oh,
getting
cool.
their own place, and so I'm happy about that. And it was definitely, it's been an inconvenience in some ways, like dealing with the dog and you know her needing to use the bathroom sometimes, and I have one bathroom, so that can be a conflict. Or I like to just kind of have my quiet time, and sometimes, oh yeah, the dog's making a bunch of racket outside or whatever, or she
But you made a huge impact, so
Mhm.
like that.
It's worth it.
Yeah.
It is worth it. It is worth it. And I will definitely say, even with all the mental and emotional anguish that comes with the territory in times, there's still the equal amount of reward from it, and watching the kiddos grow up or them make the changes for themselves and realize, like, okay, yes, I've lived in survival mode most of my life. Now I'm at peace. Cause like our BRS house, the kiddos will share their stories, and we get to ask them, how do you feel now that you're stable? And I have one kid, he's like, I enjoy the fact that there's peace. I don't have to worry about, you know, protecting myself in the aspect of how he was living
Yeah.
and whatnot. And it's
Hmm.
great to hear that. And it's like, okay, now can we establish that even though you don't have your biological, we are your family, we're your support,
Mhm.
and I understand it's going to take a long time to trust some of us, and that's okay too, as long as you see. And it's really hard for him when there's change, and he goes into droughts of isolating at times. So so you see the ups and downs, but it has its payoff. It really does.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine when things work out really well, and you can see that positive change at the very end of it all. Like, I think it's totally worth it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's got to be a massive, good feeling that you get from that. Even
Yeah.
though maybe it's a little bittersweet, like your kids going off to college and growing up and leaving the nest. It's like, okay, well, it's good because they're getting on their own 2 feet, but it's also kind of like, oh, I really miss their presence. And
Yeah.
I can imagine that's a common thing.
I have a question. When you're dealing with a child as young as you, for instance, 4 months, is there any required policy as far as like telling them that they're in the system, or is it like better to let them just think this is their family or whatever, and then I know people who adopt. That's why I'm asking. People who adopt do it one way or the other, and there's arguments for both sides. I, for one, always knew I was adopted.
Right.
My brother-in-law found out when he was an adult. So
I think it all varies from person to person at that point in time. My nephew does know that I'm auntie, even though he calls me mom, only because he hears my kiddos saying mom. So it's just part of the natural process of the nature nurture portion of things. So having them at a young age, they're still going to see you as the caregiver, primary caregiver
Which
at the
makes
end.
sense because there is no other mother present.
Right.
So of course you're going to be seen as mom.
Right.
Oh, as soon as you said that, Mr. T was in my head saying, "Mother, there is no other."
Yeah. Yeah. And I've built a rapport with mom, and mom still has a hard time because, she still has a few months to go, and, she'll be able to interact on a more regular basis once she's released from incarceration, but it's a difficult transition in that aspect. But, as long as you have the rapport with the parent, it helps with that transition as well in a lot of cases. And then there's some parents that are just absent, and that's all they're going to know is you at the end of the day. So that becomes but thank God there is support systems out there. There are foster group support groups that are out there that will help parents transition through the difficult times. You know, there are support systems out there for us, without a doubt, hands down, because the transition and understanding what the state and all the jargon is, and getting to know that coming in, it's overwhelming at first.
I can imagine. And I mean, I think everybody wants to help people, and it just gives you a good feeling to help somebody. But I mean, yeah, like you said, can be complicated and hard on everybody. And I think it takes a village, kind of, is like to that's in many cases, but in particular this, because you're dealing with a developing life.
Yeah.
And that's you gotta, like, the team effort is you get enough like, I guess, people who know things to come together, and everybody
Yeah.
knows a little bit of something in different realms, and they can all come together and help everybody.
Yeah. It's like co-parenting with multiple parents at once. Yeah.
Is this your first personal experience as a foster parent?
Technically, yes. Technically, no, at the same time, because my older kids used to bring friends home, and I just happened to, hey, I need a place to live. Okay,
Right.
cool. So I have quite a few adoptive kiddos of my own. Um, so I have one that still lives with me. She's 25. I've had her since she was 17. She did have CPS involved, and they placed her with dad, and she's like, hell no, I'm not going to be here, because she was at that age point where she would have aged out of the system anyway. The social worker and the parents were like, okay, if this is where she wants to be, she feels safe, she's comfortable, cool, we're leaving her there. So that's what they did, and that was an open closed case, and done. I've had her since she was 17.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Yep. And then I had another kiddo, my oldest daughter, she brought her home, and she needs a place to go. Her and her mom were button heads, and I was like, okay, here she is. And still calls me to this day. Hey, mom, I need help. Hey, mom, can you help me with taxes? They still come back. So, and then I have an adopted son who came by to show off his new car. It's like, so it has its points.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, Casey and I did an episode way back about family, and we both sort of believe that, like, it's not biology that determines whether you're family. It's your experience.
Yeah.
That's more important, I think, because I have friends. Casey's my friend, and I consider him to be a brother. Like,
Right.
he's my brother. And my friend Robert, you probably know him. He's my brother. Like, we've gone through so much stuff together. Like, I've spent more time with him than my own brother, you know. So, like, really, in that sense, he's basically my brother. And I think that counts from, like, the foster or the adoption standpoint. It's like,
Yeah.
we get caught up in names and everything, but I mean, really, what it comes down to is, like, family are the people who you've had those experiences with, whether they're adoptive or foster parents or biological parents or siblings or whatever. Yeah, I think it's a good thing. Yeah.
Is okay. So what you mentioned, your company, does that mean like there's a privatized function of the foster system, or is it all like government controlled?
We
Or is
work,
it kind of gray?
it's kind of gray. So, like, if I wanted to, I could open a group home myself, with my home, and say, okay, I have so many bedrooms, I could put 2 kids per room, so on and so forth. But I would have to go through all the licensing. I would have to go through, I had to have a licensor come out and say, okay, I need you to be up to code on A, B, and C. I need you to provide this kind of food. How are you going to handle these situations? If you're going to hire employees to help, you need to have these employees have to be trained. and so on and so forth. So there's a lot that goes into it. So it's
Background
like a
check, blah, blah,
third,
blah.
yeah. So there's third party entities out there that work along with the states. So I work for a group home and a BRS house, which is a behavioral rehabilitation services that we offer, which is long term for kiddos that could go home at some point, but have to learn how to regroup themselves and identify their behavioral issues and how they can go home. They can go home at some point. It's just how long are you going to stay with us until you can, because we are about reuniting them with their parent. The question is what services do the parents need and what do the kiddos need so that we can put them back hand in hand. So there is some gray areas still, and we're still working out the kinks along the way. But yeah, there are third party entities out there.
Okay. So being on the front lines of this fine line between like a total hell nightmare and like some stability, what is your opinion on just the fact that anybody can reproduce if they want to and have full rights to be a parent until they get caught doing something wrong?
I was about to bring up.
Yeah, like versus all the rigmarole you have to go through to be a foster parent or an adoptive parent. Like, what do you think about that?
That's a great question. It's difficult. It's very difficult because everybody parents differently, and who's to say that they're right or wrong? And we have that stamp of approval from society, like, okay, cool, great, this is wrong, this is how you're going to raise your kid. So in a sense, like, they still have a voice in parenting, like you said, until they get caught.
Right.
Some parents groom their
It's
kids
only wrong if you get caught, right?
Yeah, right. It's like that old saying, everybody's having fun until someone gets hurt. So it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of system at this point. And honestly, who are we to say who's wrong and right? Because
I agree. Yeah.
I mean, we can't change how our parents were raised, but we can definitely make an impact in how that kid sees and breaks the cycles, the generational cycles. But that's very difficult to get to.
Yeah. Well, I think parenting in general is always kind of an experimental experience. Like nobody goes into it having studied parenting and become an expert or gotten a degree in parenting. It just kind of happens. And then you sort of figure it out. And some people are good at it. Some people are bad at it. And so maybe like all these rules for foster care and stuff just have to do with kind of like standardizing a certain methodology. And I hope that it's not something that's set in stone, but something that's constantly being reevaluated and like where they kind of go back and like, hey, is this effective or that kind of thing, and kind of change the doctrine, so to speak. I don't know if that's the case.
It is always changing. Always. It is always, because something new always comes up. And if something, we're going to try something and see if it works. If it doesn't work, we're going to take a step back and reevaluate and say, okay, this is what's working, and so on and so forth. So there's so many people involved. There's therapists, there's drug and alcohol counselors, there's WISE teams, which is just a bunch of, people who come in and do therapy and touch bases with the kids and give them, help them with coping skills. And then you have a staff who also teach them coping skills and have that structure and say, okay, and teach them the routine they're not used to having. Your routine from home has changed because now you're here, you're in a complete stranger's house, but by the time you leave, you're not a stranger no more. So, now you have.
In some ways, I'd almost say that foster care is superior in a way in what you're talking about to just regular parenting, because of you have this whole team.
I was thinking that too. Yeah. Like I never really thought about it that way, but like, when you think about like the amount of oversight that is involved, however good or bad you might might view that in general, at least there's like an eye on it. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering, how modular is it though? Like, if you want to send your ward to a Waldorf school or something, like, is that okay? Or does it have to be like the public school system and nothing else? Or
No, so there's a lot of flexibility when it comes to school because, we could have one kiddo who is lives in the same town, we can still transport them to school. Or if they're 2 hours away, it's gonna determine on the social worker and the state whether or not they want to do the transporting. Can we
mm,
get a transporter to get them? Is the kiddo willing to cooperate and get up 2 or 3 hours before we normally would wake up a kid to go to school and then come back? So the
yeah,
alternative is, can we get you on online schooling? Can we work with your school to where they can do hybriding school for you in the meantime until you either return home or are placed where you need to be, and then they'll transition them to another school. So you guys may not know it. Some of us did, and some of us didn't growing up. That we have a lot of foster care kids in our school system,
Mm-hmm.
huh.
and it's like
I never
they're
thought about that. Yeah.
they're planted there. We just don't realize it.
Oh, and now I'm thinking too, because that like kids who are from in military families where they're constantly being transferred around and stuff, and
Yeah.
you start to make friends, and then boom, you're in a new school, and then you start to make friends, and boom, you're in a new school, and that kind
Mm,
of that's got to be really rough because it's kind of the same thing, right? Because
yeah.
kids can move around quite a bit, so yeah, I could see that happening, and that, oh god, and on top of, because at least with like the military kids, they're going with their family, so their parents or whoever are coming with them to their new location. But like if you change foster parents, you lose your family and your friends and your school, and then you're going into a
Yep.
whole new situation. Oh my god.
Yeah, and then for them to determine, like, okay, you can have contact with, like, the social workers are like, okay, you can have contact with A, B, and C. You cannot have contact with this person, this person, this person. And it's like, yeah, you had the freedom to use your cell phone, or you had your freedom to use the, internet. And depending on what the kid has gone through, we're supervising that. We're monitoring it. There's no way, and do these kids get things past us staff? Absolutely. They're teenagers. It's going to happen, and given their survival, skills that they learn along the way. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But we have to be on our toes to say, okay, this is what we're going to do to reprimand and say, okay, we're going to reevaluate this and how can we do this better so that the safety comes first for that child, you know? And these kids are on it. They are on it. They put those skills to use. I tell them all the time, put those skills to good use. Cause I mean, if you can do that, yeah, I could right now you could do, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it's all a matter of them seeing it for themselves. And it's hard sometimes.
Well, and that actually brings me to something I was thinking too. That what are the kind of struggles that you go through, or maybe other people like that you've heard of, or something that? What are the challenges if somebody wanted to become a foster parent, and get involved? Because I mean, we could talk about all the good things, but that you got to be honest too. It's like, okay, you got to know what you're getting yourself into. So what are the difficulties that have
The,
surfaced?
the difficulties is somebody digging into your past and bringing that up. So if you've been through some stuff in your past and it's like, oh, are you mentally, emotionally stable to take care of this child? What can you offer this child knowing that you either been through a similar situation as this child or whatever it may have been. And I mean, they're digging, they dig, and they go and they will question your own kids and say, okay, how was your mom raising you? And what did you all go through? How did your mom make it through this? And how did she support you through this? If you've committed a crime, and it was over 20 something years ago. You have to go through um, this process of elimination of whether or not the state sees you fit enough to be able to be with this kiddo,
So
regardless.
it sounds like getting top secret security clearance or something.
Yeah, yeah. They want to make sure that you're absolutely stable enough to handle bringing in, and can you put your biases aside to say, okay, this is somebody else's kid, you're going to be watching them for a while, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to come into your home, we're going to check to see if this kid is doing well, and even you're every month you're under scrutiny anyway, because they're coming in to see, is this kid bruised from head to toe, is he being fed, there's a lot that goes into, is the home safe? Are they keeping their plugins, covered, the outlets covered? Is there like child safety proofing locks? It's, is this kid on a set schedule or not? What does it look like for routine for this kid? Like, they grill everything.
So that's a
What is
big
it?
kind of a challenge too, in that you've always got somebody coming in and checking out what's going on and inspecting things and
And
nitpicking probably all the time.
yep, yep. And then you only get bits and pieces of information. You don't know what's 100% what's going on in the case till you go to court and they're like, oh, so this is what we're doing, and parents are doing this and parents are doing that. They're doing great, blah, blah, blah. Oh, thanks. You're kind of left in the dark in that sense.
Hmm.
So
And
the whole sins of the father thing, like, always bothered me. So, like, something you did 20 years ago, like, how much
mm,
does that really impact the way you are now? And does any of that, like, carry through to the message that the foster child is receiving? Like, do they know how much rigmarole you're going through? Um, should they, maybe, like, should they, as an example, see, look how much your decisions today will impact you 20 years from now? Like, is that something that could be a powerful positive tool?
it is, given the fact that, like, there's a place and a time for it to share with the kiddos. And some of these teens absolutely know what it takes to go through the system itself.
Mhm.
Um, some of them actually know the system better than we do sometimes, which is kind of mind-boggling at the same time, but they've been in it for so long, they had no choice but to learn it.
Right.
And we do teach the kids that even though, yes, you made this mistake, you don't have to keep living it and moving forward. So that should be the same for those that are going through the process as well. But what have they done to improve their life to not repeat that? And how to help them? Because that is asked when you're going through the interview process. What have you gained from it? What have you lost from it? What did you do differently so that you can break that cycle? It is asked. It is a grueling and very in-depth. It is very mentally and emotionally exhausting to go through the process.
Okay, but I see that as positive, that they at least ask you what you learned. Like, they're at least giving you that road to redemption, rather than just saying, well, you did this once, so nope, you can't be a foster parent. Like, at least there's the chance to say,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, I fucked up, but look what I learned.
Yeah.
Everybody makes mistakes too. Like,
Yeah.
you do
Well,
things
yeah.
in your youth, or when you haven't had a lot of experience. You may do something stupid and then learn from it and grow, and like you look back and like, man, that was dumb.
Yeah.
And there's no way you would ever do that again now. But again, that's one of the things, like when they're looking through your past, even when you get like a security clearance, like every little tiny thing, even a post on Facebook, when Facebook first, or no, MySpace, something you posted on MySpace, they're going to like pick at that.
I can go 2 weeks back and say, man, that was dumb.
Right. Oh my goodness. Yeah. There are some downsides to it too, though. I mean, not everybody's equipped to deal with, things being brought back up. It
Yeah.
we want to leave it back there. There's a reason why we left it there, and we don't want to keep unpacking it and then have to repack it. And that's how, that's our kiddos too. They don't have to
Are you
keep.
surprised at what they can dig up?
Oh, it is ridiculous what they can freaking dig up. Like, you have all of this time to do this. Why is it that our system has so many gray areas now, still to this day, if you can dig like that? So
Right.
where do we bridge the gaps and how do we help it? And
Mhm.
don't say that you guys can't do something, because I know better than that.
And maybe that, like you said, they have so much time. It What if that all that energy and all those resources were put to improving the system, or put towards the kids more than just inspecting every last little bit of minutia in a person's life? um yeah, it
So are
just
you saying the people that check whether or not you're a good foster parent should be the people that are checking whether or not you should be able to have a gun?
yeah, that's a whole different
Whoa.
episode.
Yeah. Whoa.
That's a whole different episode. We'll do an episode about that someday.
Ooh.
So here's another thing too. Like, so the challenges in terms of becoming a foster parent is one thing, but what about like the day-to-day kinds of things? Because I mean, even just being a regular parent is pretty tough. And then you add on top of that the fact that you've got somebody coming in that maybe they've already had a bunch of experiences in the past, and now you're dealing with that, and maybe if there's more than one foster kid in the household, and the conflicts that might emerge from that, I just can imagine it could be extremely it could take a lot of effort to kind of juggle all those balls,
It
right?
does. It does. It absolutely does. Yes, you have your parenting skills, but there's also, the state offers training for foster parents too. So they take you through scenarios of um, the physically aggressive kids that are going to come in, how to handle, them, or redirect them, nurture them to where they need to be. Um, 9 times out of 10, these kids have already been evaluated and have a therapist on hand. So you have that as a support as well. The social worker will always be there as well. You can always reach out to the social worker. Those that come into protective custody, they might have a probation officer or a parole officer. So you have that team too. So you still have a village with you at the end of the day. So it's
That
not.
that's awesome. Yeah, like, okay,
Yeah.
instead of having
Well,
to go it all alone, essentially, which
Yeah.
why can't we have that for every kid?
yeah, it's a good
Eh,
point.
well, if we can come together as a community, we could, but
Mhm.
who's willing to make those sacrifices at the time? It's
Mm,
a lot of time and a lot of energy to be putting into, because, like, I mean, like Eric put that time into building the house for the friend.
mm.
How much time did that take away from his personal life that he
Quite a bit,
devoted?
and
Yeah.
money too.
Yes. And sometimes you don't get that paid back in the amount. You might get this little stipend that just barely covers for diapers and wipes or extra food in the house.
Mhm.
So you have to use those outside resources. You have to build your community. And if you don't have that community, and it's no joke, it does take a village to raise the kids
Yeah,
and
I
support the
agree.
parents.
We have the technology nowadays to build communities like that, in for not just for foster care or adoptive care or whatever and that kind of thing, like just in general. Like, we really should. I don't know why that isn't more of a thing. Like, people need to team up and come together and help each other, and take a little bit of time for to contribute to helping raise kids, and help other families, and whatever you can. I mean, I have two kids that I sponsor overseas, and like Nepal and Uganda, and it's really cool to just see them grow up and know that I'm helping in some way. I mean, it's just financial and the occasional letter and stuff, but that's good. And it's like everybody could do that. And if you got the local community together and kind of did that thing, I think everybody would be better off for it.
Oh yeah.
Even that the
I'm,
amount of energy you put in to help, like give of yourself to help other people, you get back a lot more rewards in the form of just feeling good and watching what you did flourish into something bigger than what you put in.
My
Yeah.
aunt that did all the foster and slash adopting, when I went through cancer and I had a fundraiser, she like anonymously donated like almost $1,000. I forget how I deduced that it was her, but it like I did, and I was like just astounded at like she didn't even have a job, and my uncle had like like a city job, which of course pays good and stuff, but like they have all these kids too, so it's like I did the math in my head, and I'm like, you couldn't have had that much money to spare, but like you like put your nephew before your own self and gave all this money, like that still to this day like uh brings me to tears almost, because
I'm
like
getting a little, yeah, myself.
yeah, like that much of a village
Yeah.
is really like in the end everybody eventually needs the village.
Yeah.
We all will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The director of the company I work for, her husband runs a church here in Tacoma,
Mhm.
and the kids can go and volunteer in the church, if they need community service, or they just go to church, period, so that they can have a community.
Mhm.
We have people who donate clothes to the group homes and, basic hygiene stuff and things like that. It matters. It makes a big difference because sometimes these kiddos come to us with nothing.
Well,
Sometimes
and
they come with their whole
yeah,
bedroom.
and say what you want about organized religion, there are some positive, like the community and the good that a lot of churches actually do, just giving to the community to help people, and but that even just the sense of belonging you can have in a church, like,
Yeah.
oh, hey, we're all together here, and that can really help somebody who's feeling lost and stuff. And sure, there are pitfalls in that it can go a little too far, but I think the risk, the benefits outweigh the risks in that.
Well, and real quick, because I've lived off of food banks before. It if you are a person that donates to food banks, like have it in mind to throw in some stuff like deodorant and soap and stuff,
Mhm.
because food stamps won't cover that stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
Tampons and like all these things that like actually need aren't covered.
Yeah.
Non-food items that are
Yeah.
still very critical, like hygiene products and things.
Mhm.
Diapers and stuff like that. Like there's a food bank here on the east side that you have to ask for it, but they do it once a week. They will help with formula and diapers and wipes and stuff for families.
Oh.
Yeah, and sometimes they get donations of like baby items, like strollers and stuff like that. So it's just a matter of asking the right people sometimes and
Mhm.
knowing the resources that are out there.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Well, one of my friends, he years and years ago, when his daughter was really young, um, his car broke down and he didn't have any money, and he actually went to a church and
mhm.
asked them, "Hey, I've got to get my daughter to school, and I got to go, go to work so I can like afford to help raise her and keep her in a house." And
Mhm.
the church paid for the car to be repaired. I think it was like a transmission replacement or something. So really
Oh.
expensive. They just paid for it. They didn't
Jeez.
even, he just told his story and they just paid for the transmission to be replaced. Like, that's a good thing. We need more of that. We need a
Yeah.
Yeah.
lot more of that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We should start a kitchen sink microscopy charity fund,
Charity. Yeah.
because yeah, like it shouldn't just be churches. Like there should be other organizations and
Mhm.
schools of thought that contribute to that sort of um like the sort of like everyday life thing that people just do on autopilot, that they don't think about, well, if I had nothing, how would I achieve this?
Mm-hmm.
Like not stinking, you don't think about that. But if you have no money, you get nothing toward deodorant. You
Well,
get nothing
and then
towards
try
soap.
getting a job if you walk into an interview and your clothes are all disheveled and you're all stinky.
Mhm.
Like,
Right. Try even getting the job interview without a cell phone these days.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, exactly. Oh,
like
yeah, I agree.
it's
Like,
ridiculous.
it shouldn't just be churches or the government. We need more just general organizations, charity organizations that's all they do is help people in these kinds of small ways that, man,
I mean, like
we have the
these
resources.
these things don't even have to exist here in Germany, because there is just a social network. Like for the whole country, there's a safety net. Like you can't possibly become homeless unless you want to.
Except
Like
there's
you
probably
actually want to have no home and live on the street.
you probably wouldn't be able to go to the state in Germany and ask for your transmission to be replaced, though.
Maybe not, but how often does that happen? Like,
Well, I mean, that's
But
just one of many things that could happen.
yeah,
It might
right,
not be.
how are the relationships with your neighbors? Do you have, can you say you trust your neighbor in Germany? Whereas here we have, some of us can't trust our neighbors to rely on them.
Mhm.
It's not
actually,
like when
yeah.
our
Like
grandparents
I
growing
feel
up were,
super safe here, super safe. Like, and there's still this like 1950s mentality of knowing your neighborhood, like not just your neighbor, but like go walk your dog and like somebody who lives like half a mile away,
Well,
or I'm
and that's
sorry, like a
where
few hundred kilometers away.
that's something that I think probably needs to come back into the US, that we've
Mhm.
kind of lost here, this sense of community, local community, your neighbors, the people that live and work in your general area, just getting to know them, the ability for somebody, to, well, I remember, Casey, when you and I were roommates down there on over by what was it, South or North 56th or whatever, Roger's house. We I remember when it was Yasser and Hyder. They moved in, and one day I think you were at work or something, and Yasser came up and knocked on the door and introduced himself, and it's like, "Oh yeah, I'm the neighbor who lives downstairs and stuff." I'm like, "Hey, how's it going?" And he's like, "Hey, do you have any sugar?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I got sugar. Here you go." And I handed him the sugar thing, and he like used whatever he needed and brought it back and stuff. And it's like, that's what we need. You go to your
Mhm.
neighbor and knock on the door and, "How's it going? And hey, do you happen to have this thing or something?" And then,
Yeah.
trade with each other, whether it be, "Hey, can you watch my kid for a couple hours so I can go do this thing?"
Yeah.
That kind of
right.
thing.
Yeah. When I was growing up on the East Coast and I, go to my grandparents' house every weekend, they knew their neighbors. We
Mhm.
knew all of the neighbors in the community,
Mhm.
and if something happened with my grandparents, the neighbors would come over and help out,
Mhm.
or vice versa. My uncles would go over and help, like redo their roof or their flooring, or hey, we're gonna put a ramp in for you. They just were like that. Come here, and now that I'm getting older, it's definitely disintegrated as what family values are and what it looks like to have a community.
Mhm.
Because I
And
could
that's the
say,
thing. Like, maybe foster care would be less necessary if we had these kind of neighborhood communities. That a family that's struggling with things could get help from their neighbors.
That's a great point, because like the fine line between the straw that breaks the camel's back, whether or not you can support your family. uh
Yeah.
it could be as simple as like, can my neighbor help?
Mm-hmm.
you
yeah,
know um I since I've lived here, the neighbors come over to help with things that I'm not capable of fixing. um right before I moved here, a neighbor took my stepdaughter to the hospital when it wasn't possible for my wife to go. Like these sort of things are becoming like much less common in the US
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, where actually neighbors are almost completely adversarial now.
I grew up not knowing more than two of my neighbors, two or three of my neighbors,
Yeah.
in an entire block, which, like I totally just shared space with for most of my early life. I didn't even know them.
Well, and I call you old man, but I'm older than you. When I was a kid, um, the neighborhood that we grew up in, well, when I was kind of like a little bit older, we had a house before that didn't really have like a neighborhood community. And then we moved into this more quiet section. And there were a bunch of houses there that had kids, and all of us kids would come out and play together. But it was possible for my parents to leave and go to the neighbors across the street and be like, oh, yeah, Eric and Jason, my brother, they're going to just hang out here and play video games or run around the yard while we go and do this thing. And the same thing would happen with them. The kids in the neighborhood, they'd come over and hang out with us while their parents went and did something. And it was just like a normal thing. And you get to know people. And we didn't know all of our neighbors, but quite a few. And, when there was actually a time when there was a huge storm and a massive tree in one of the neighbors' houses or in their property fell over and crushed the garage and multiple garages and the neighbor's RV and stuff like that. And all the neighbors around came to help clean up. There was a guy with a chainsaw sawing things up, and there were people pulling things out and cleaning up and stuff. And nobody had to pay for that. It comes around. Like, yeah, you give of yourself now, but then when you need help, they'll help you back because they'll remember, hey, that's that neighbor that did all that work for me.
My dad, when he would tell me all of his stories about growing up at Mason Lake back in the 50s, 60s, they didn't have like a fire station out there. So everybody on the lake would come to the aid of a fire, and there'd be a bucket brigade of kids with like a metal bucket at the lake, and they'd hand it to the next kid, and it would go up the hill to the house, and there would just be another bucket that'd be filling it. And like that was a community coming to the aid. And like there's no reason that can't exist. In fact, there's fewer reasons it shouldn't exist because we have so much connectivity with cell phones now that you would think, oh, something like that would be easier to facilitate. But no, it's not. Why?
Yeah, and I think it's a cultural shift. I don't know. Perhaps.
Yeah.
Which is sad.
Well, that's kind of a digression.
That's what we do.
Fostering, but that is what we do best. Yeah. Well, are there anything like any common misconceptions about the foster system that you would like to dispel?
Yeah, that it could be a nasty place at times. I mean, there's some challenges, but they have definitely revised and are on top of, because you hear the horror stories like this happened to this kid, or this happened to me when I was in foster care. It's been reduced to the point where kids don't have to worry about the safety unless it's one kid giving a kid something else that they're not supposed to have, like bringing in the drugs, sneaking it in, that kind of thing. No. And we screen everybody these days, background checks. And if we don't feel comfortable, and we work as a team, it is, hey, if we don't feel that this person we let the people know that are above us and say, not a good fit. They're going to clash with our kiddos. So on and so forth. There's some red flags. We immediately remove them at the end of the day. So, and every quarter we have a licensor that comes in, or once a year we have a licensor that comes in. And, if we have an incident, we're automatically being looked at. So it doesn't matter if we have to call EMTs or if kids have altercations, we are always on it, and I think that a lot of people think, oh, we don't care, that as adults don't care. We do, because we end up paying the price at the end. It's not the kiddos. I mean, the kiddos do in a different aspect, but like for safety reasons, we pay that price. At the end, we could lose the opportunity to even be a foster parent. Like, it's a fine line.
Yeah, you don't sign up for something like that unless you care,
Yeah.
and I think people maybe gloss over that.
Yeah.
Well, because it's an investment of your energy and resources.
Right. And the kid, we hear it from the kiddos from time to time that, oh, you guys are just here for a paycheck. There is not that. It's not a great pay system. It's the reward comes from the mental and emotional investment that you have with these kiddos just to see the change. It's not like you're making $100,000 a year, because that's not the case.
Yeah. You're probably just barely breaking even.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, is it even pay, or more like a sort of system of like recompense, right? Like, hey, you're spending this much to take care of the kids, so here's a little money, like.
So I don't spend the money in the group home. It's going to be the director and whoever runs the business, and they get a certain amount per month. Like, here's a bed, and you're going to get $100 a bed, and it's just an example, $100 per bed, even though it's empty, right? To keep us open. That's not going to cover all the employees. So we have to have a kid in that bed. So, and then each kid is at a certain level. There's a pay scale for that, right? So we want to have those kids there in order for us to have what we can to support them, and we have outside donors, that donate to the group home. So the state does not always balance us out financially, if that makes sense, because they're allotted so much per kid for dividends to be pushed out for the kids for the year. So, and like, kiddos only get a $400 clothing voucher, hygiene voucher for the year. Jeez. That's not a lot.
No.
Yeah. Well, the entire social system of the United States is barely enough. Like, you have a chance to survive, but not a guarantee to survive. Like, you have to supplement that with something.
Yeah. Yeah. And people think that the kids just sit there and know they get to do whatever when they're there. That's not the case either. We do take them to doctor's appointments. We take them to the dentist appointments. We are the in-between people for you when you can't take care of the kids. So we're there running those passes for you at the same time. So your kids are still being taken care of. So there's a lot of misconception of, we don't care. We do care. A lot of us are devoting extra time and taking away from our own families to contribute to your family. So, and it's learning to, teach them self-care as well at the same time as taking care of ourselves. And it's a balance that comes in between. So, and I think a lot of people also have a misconception that some people get involved because they're trying to heal their own wounds. Word of advice: if you're coming into the human service field, definitely work through your own first before you come work with the kiddos, because you never know what's going to trigger you. You just never know. You just never know, because they dump. There are times they dump, and are you ready for the overload? Yeah.
I mean, I can see how, like, someone might be inspired to pay it forward, help someone the way that they were helped, but not everybody has, what do the kids say today? The spoons.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, like, definitely, like, ask yourself, like, is this something I could really commit to.
Well, and
That's a huge deal. Yeah.
Sure. And you have the spoons, but also you have the experience too. You need to have enough knowledge and life experience to be able to handle those kinds of things. And that's like, you got to be like an elder, essentially. I think like some kind of wizened person that's been around a lot and experienced so many things, and maybe have a little bit of a stoic philosophy so you can kind of weather the bumps in the road, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's I definitely couldn't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's kids that come in and they have misconception about the adults. They're like, you don't know what we're going through. And it's like, only if you knew, only if you knew, kind of thing. And it's like, and then when you start talking to them and they look at you like, but you talk so educated and you sound like a square. And it's like, that's the misconception of assuming, or judging a book by its cover.
Mm-hmm.
Never judge a book by its cover. Because if I judged you, how would you feel?
Mm-hmm.
Slated. And it's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, valid. It's a valid point. So they learn to not pass judgment. So, yeah, I've surprised a lot of kids in my time. A lot.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Like you growing up, you think you're going through stuff that is unique to your life experience. Like, oh my God, I'm the only one that's ever experienced this. No, there are countless other adults out there that, yeah, they had the exact same thing happen when they were your age, or maybe even worse, maybe crazier things.
Right. And to go back to touch on something that Casey had asked earlier about, is there government facilities too? Yes, there is. You have Raymond Hall, you have Green Hill and Nacelle and Echo Glen, you have all that. So when you have kids who run, they go to Raymond Hall. They don't get returned home right away because there's a reason why they ran. A lot of the kids that are out there committing crimes, and people are like, kids don't do that. Kids can be mean.
Oh yeah.
Volatile. Oh
yeah.
my Lord.
Yep.
No way that kid did that. Yeah, that kid did do that.
They could do far more crazy criminal acts than a lot of adults, honestly. Not speaking from experience, but
yeah, I mean, like empathy, let's face it, empathy is something you have to learn. So it kind of makes sense that kids are capable of some pretty heinous shit. Because they haven't seen a lot, they haven't felt a lot. So it kind of stands to reason that, like they can really like hit a nerve.
Well, especially once they start getting hormonal and they're trying to wrap their head around these weird feelings, we as adults, we could absolutely handle it. But for somebody that it's their first time experiencing those feelings, go a little haywire.
Yeah, they do. Because I've worked for Echo Glen, and this is my second group home, working for a group home, so they're definitely there. System's there.
Yeah,
so it's a wide variety.
I think it's kind of our duty as humans to help other humans if we have the capacity. I think everybody has a little bit. Some people have more than others. For some, it's financial capacity. Like, oh, you got a lot of extra money, then you could donate to people who take their time to do things. Or if you have skills or time to volunteer, whatever, everybody can do a little bit of something. But I think that's key. And I mean, this applies not just to foster care, but just life in general.
Yeah.
We're all on this stupid dirt ball flying around space together, kind of not really aware of exactly what we need to do, don't really have a direction, or really a sense of meaning. And yeah, like we should help each other.
Well, any amount of knowledge that you can pass on, to a peer, to a younger generation, even to an older generation, it pays dividends because they can pass that on too.
And improve on
they can benefit from that.
That's the whole like teach a man to fish philosophy sort of thing.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. And each one of us has something unique to add to them 100%. So
Absolutely.
I have that nurturing side to me, just naturally it's there. So I get a lot of kids that cling to me and it's like, okay, let's do this. Let's go cook. We're in the kitchen, we're cooking, and it's like, why sit in front of the TV and numb out all the time when we could be doing something productive? Or let's go do some artwork. We do that, and I'll sit with the kiddos and I'll ask them like, hey, what are you doing to take care of you mentally or emotionally? Like, are you journaling? Are you drawing? You can color, you can do puzzles, and it's like I share little tidbits with them and it's like, oh, okay. And it's helped them and they carry it with them, and sometimes we get our repeat kids that come back to us and they're like, I remember you. I had one kid who butted heads with me one time and she goes, oh, it's you. I said, oh, yeah, unfortunately. But you're here for the duration. Let's go. We're going to have to get along. And she just laughed at me. She was like, okay. But she grew a lot in that time. And her and I got along. And she's like, okay. She would come to me and she's like, this kid is working my nerves. I was like, okay, what are you doing? She goes, I'm going to go over here in my little space over here. I said, okay, sounds like a great idea. And, I'll support that. I'll let her know to like leave you alone kind of thing. So it's just like, okay, we're teaching them boundaries and having that self-respect and showing people like if I have my self-respect and it's teaching them at the same time, but they don't realize that their actions are what people are going to hear more. So I love it. I wouldn't trade it for the world at this point. So
I think it does a lot of good. I mean, every little bit counts. You can't really change the world, but you can change your little corner of the world
mm-hmm.
and inspire others to do the same. That's key. Like you have the nurturing sort of aspect, and for me, it's like I love teaching people how to do things, how to build things, how to repair stuff, how to be self-sufficient and independent. That's kind of my thing. And I've learned a lot and made a lot of mistakes. That's how I learned. And so like Casey was saying, pass that knowledge on, so somebody has a little bit of an easier path in life. That, oh, hey, I don't have to make that mistake because that other person did that and they suffered the consequences, and now I know how to do that without having to struggle.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And you can pass on a lot. It doesn't have to be intelligence. It could be an emotional intelligence. It could be how to keep your cool when shit goes sideways. Like stuff that you can't really teach in a school. That's a valuable lesson to pass along too. So
exactly.
if you have the spoons, go ahead and maybe give consideration to foster parenting.
Yeah, definitely. We definitely need them.
Well, yeah, you were saying there's not enough. So I think hopefully we can inspire other people to consider that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or you maybe don't have to be a foster parent, but like you were saying too, people donate. Maybe
are there
donate.
donations or resources that people could at least contribute to?
They can volunteer. Yep, absolutely. Like you guys, each one of us has something different to contribute. The kiddos are always needing an outlet. Always. They need skill to learn. Yep. Yep. I mean, we take them out fishing, we take them out bowling, we do those kind of things. So like the Big Brother Big Sister program that used to run around here in town, I don't know if it still exists, but I know, we had the Boys and Girls Club and we take them to the Y, things like that. But to like learn a skill, like we have a kiddo who wants to do electrician work. Let's get you hooked up with somebody to walk you through it.
Yeah.
Why not?
I can't do that stuff.
Right?
Well,
right.
And here's the thing too, is if you're struggling going through a very difficult time in your life where there's changes in family, or you're moving from household to household, learning a skill like that, or building a hobby or something that gives you some kind of grounding that you can carry with you from place to place.
Nice electrician there, grounding.
Yes, very much so.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Well, I think this has been extremely enlightening
Yeah.
and informative. I thank you so much for
Yeah, you're welcome.
joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm
Mhm.
glad that I
Yeah,
finally got to do it.
yeah, well, I mean, we've touched on, my personal experience as an adoptee, but having a look into the foster system has been super enlightening. It's is really, I don't know, like inspiring in a
Yeah.
way. As a, I've recently become a stepfather. I hear some stuff in there that like I could apply to my own life in a way.
And another thing, I think it's like this conversation kind of gives me hope for the future that
Yeah.
maybe things won't be so bad. That because I had some misconceptions about the foster system and how it operates and stuff. And thinking about it now, like, maybe we don't have all the answers, but we're in good hands.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the kids that have the opportunity to age out, I mean, the system does give them a free ride to college if they want to take it.
Oh wow.
But people don't know. They do help them teach them life skills. They go through a whole teaching and they do help them get into an apartment.
Hmm.
So if they have that opportunity to age out, then yeah, there are some benefits to it and there's some downfalls because sometimes some of these kids have a hard time adjusting, but and still building those bonds. But if we can teach them that it's okay to have those bonds with people, even if they're strangers, then they're going to be absolutely successful.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Well,
that
they're only strangers.
college and or vocational school?
Yep. Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Yep. We talk
Very
about it
cool.
all. We cover everything. Like, you don't have to go to college. You can learn a trade. You can
I,
go if you choose to go to Job Corps. You can do that too. We'll back you guys on it.
I definitely back that 100%. That
Yep.
if you're not sure what you want to do, go to a trade school and learn a
Yeah.
trade.
Yeah.
It's a lot less expensive, and you know what? You can actually make a lot more money than you can go into like a
Oh, a
university.
lot more as you can as a scientist, let me tell you.
Yeah. Yeah, you could be a roofer and be six figures like
Oh yeah.
a
Right.
couple of years.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Just getting the kids to pique their interest and say, okay, maybe, and introducing them to people that are like, hey, let's walk you through what's your interest and why does it pique your interest?
Mm-hmm.
I like
Yeah.
that guy's haircut, by the way.
Thanks. He's being slick.
well, well, this has been awesome.
Yeah. Thanks, guys, for the opportunity.
No,
Thank you for coming on. That was like
Yeah.
way better than expected. Like, I mean, I always say that I'm biased. This show is awesome, but like that was a really good discussion that I think will do a lot of people a lot of good.
Yeah. And I think that we could teach our kids too that be kind. Definitely be kind because you never know what the kiddos at school are going through.
Yep.
You
Oh
just
yeah,
don't
I will
assume.
second that motion.
Yeah, you just do not know. This bullying stuff that we're seeing, that's a whole nother ballpark.
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah.
It's a
Oh
rough
yeah.
one. And it seems like the kids are meaner these days than when we were growing up.
It does seem that way.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a rough one.
Well, and that's the thing. Like every parent or foster parent or adopted parent is responsible for teaching their kids to do right. And
Yeah,
like you said, be kind. Be
yep,
kind to people and be empathetic. Try to understand. Not everything is as it appears.
right.
So,
Yeah,
all right. Well, I think that's about a good time to conclude things.
all right.
And
Thank you
thank you
very
so
much
much.
for coming on to the show.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Mhm.
You're welcome, guys.
All right. Well,
If you're interested in becoming a foster parent, definitely look into that. Evaluate yourself, and ask yourself like, what am I doing this for? Like
mhm.
it has to be It has to be a measure of selflessness. It has to also be a measure of self-growth, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, and
You're welcome.
yeah, have a good day or night, whoever's watching, whenever you're watching. All right. Take
right.
it easy, everybody. Be kind.
Broken is my heart of glass. Please to end the pain. Spoke through tears in vain. Do you wanna break me? You can shatter me, but then there's just more of me to shine. Come on, try and break me. Do you think you need the extra time? You can see it all inside of me. Shattered is my heart of glass again. A stained glass window to my soul.